Welcome into the draft day preview of Texas Tech football. David Collier, Kaylee Joe Hummel here. Kaylee Joe, we had the opportunity of watching a historic season of Texas Tech football. No doubt we'll hear several Red Raiders names when the draft comes up later this month in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and since the draft got moved to 7 rounds, the most Red Raiders that have ever been drafted 4 at a time, that could easily be matched when it comes to this draft.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The most ever was back in 1956, but they had 30 rounds back then. This time around, like you mentioned, only 7. Here's the schedule for the draft. It starts on April 23rd. Things kick off at 7 p.m. there in Pittsburgh. It will continue with rounds 2 and 3 on Friday, and then Saturday it wraps up with rounds 4 through 7. Again, we'll probably see plenty of Red Raiders. We know of one in particular. Obviously, David Bailey won't have to wait long to hear his name called. In some projections, going as high as number 2, and why not? He led the nation with 14.5 sacks a year ago. Kaylee Joe, 52 tackles, has visited numerous teams leading up to the draft. Could be the highest drafted Red Raider since Dave Parks, who went number 1 overall back in 1964 to the San Francisco Giants. Bailey, just a freak on the edge, 4.5 40, and he certainly stood out on all of the on-the-field drills at the Combine earlier this month.
I think I'm just a little bit more explosive. I think I have a great fourth step. I think I have a whole bunch of moves. And then also I've been in different positions in terms of football play. Like I've played off the ball linebacker, dropping into the flat. So I think I have a diverse set of tools. I took a good step from junior year to senior year. But I also want to know that I feel like I'm not really scratching the surface of the football player that I can become. I feel like there's just so much stuff I can work on. I can become a great player. So I feel like taking that next step, getting underneath a scheme and a coaching staff that can push me to become a great player, like I feel like they can bring out a lot more in me.
Bailey, all business. Lee Hunter, the fun guy. One scouting report, Kaylee Jones said Hunter is built like a beer keg and brings forklift power to the interior defensive line.
Yeah, I will never forget those duck faces from the Combine. 41 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. Expected to go day 2. Here's Lee Hunter back at the Combine.
I just be me all the time, be real. I talk trash. If I talk trash to you, I get your best. And when I get your best, you get me better. And now we win, and we prepare to win on Saturday. I won't say I stand out from everybody else. I just take pride in just doing my job at the best of its ability, and I try to perfect my craft in many ways. I'm bringing to the team high energy. I'm a football player. You're going to love me in the locker room. You're going to feel my presence, and you're going to enjoy being around me daily.
Okay, the only duo that's better than peanut butter and jelly, I would say David Bailey and Romello Height. Let's talk about Height now, also projected to go day 2.
I'm going to hunt the quarterback.
Texas Tech edge rusher Romello Height making it clear what he brings to the table ahead of the NFL draft.
We're going to stop drives and we're going to win games. They could expect me to, give my all and play for the guy that's beside me.
Showing off to scouts at Pro Day.
I was super ready. Knowing that all 32 teams was here, I was ready to go out and, put on the show and perform for those guys.
And the Combine, recording a 4.64 second 40-yard dash.
Just continuing to stack days and keep going.
His first and final season for the Red Raiders, tallying 38 tackles, 10 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles, which he owes to his hard work beyond the games.
Try to perfect my craft, going out, doing field work, living in the training room, staying on top of my body. It was just the little things, to be able to go out and execute at a high level.
Height with a college career spanning Auburn, USC, and Georgia Tech too, but it's his last landing spot he says is the reason his draft dreams will come true.
I set my goal coming in here, and I was able to get it done, and it put me in the position I'm in right now.
Another Red Raider projected to go on day 2, linebacker Jacob Rodriguez, Mr. Everything. He won basically every defensive award for his senior season at Texas Tech, and a lot of people paid attention then. They pay even more attention after what he did at the Senior Bowl practices and at the Combine, and obviously the one thing they know they're getting in Jacob Rodriguez is a guy that can force turnovers.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams, like how I can take the football away, and it's a huge difference in winning football games is winning the turnover battle. And so that's a big thing that we talk about is, different ways to be able to do that, and then also where I can plug and play in different spots. And so some teams see me in, certain positions, and some teams see me in others, but whatever, the case may be, I'm more excited to, play on defense, but then be able to find a role in special teams and really help out any way we can to, win football games. Well, I think I've put my all into, this pre-draft process, and I really enjoy talking football. And so it's easy to go into places and talk football and talk coverage and talk, scheme. And so I think that's fun. I think it's a good time, kind of lose track of time and always go over just because, it's something that we love to do. But I don't really hold too much weight to it. There's 32 teams and they're all, great teams. And so you never know where you're going to go. And so just building those relationships as you go along and obviously you'd love to be the first pick in the draft, but there's only one of those. And so anywhere you get picked, if you get picked, is, like I said earlier, just joining a huge fraternity of guys to do something special.
Someone else worth talking about, Skylar Gill Howard. Now, he went out for the rest of the season after that Kansas game, an ankle injury, but he definitely was a power on the defense. You cannot forget that big boy pick six.
Yeah, and another guy who didn't get much respect, I guess, in the postseason. He wasn't invited to the Combine like Skylar Gill Howard was. Cole Wisniewski is a guy that I'm going to keep a close eye on, a safety, maybe have to play some cornerback. But I did notice during Pro Day that we were both at earlier this month, Kaylee Joe, that a lot of teams were talking to Cole. One in particular, Brian Schottenheimer, the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, certainly showed some interest. That's the best thing about this Pro Day. All 32 teams were at Texas Tech, so they got a chance to look at not only Cole and Skylar Gill Howard, but a lot of the other guys that are hoping maybe to sign as a free agent, whether it be on the offensive or defensive side of the ball. Speaking of the offense, let's look at some of the other guys that are projected to go in the NFL draft later this month. We'll start with the wide receivers. Caleb Douglas and Reggie Virgil, both projected to go on day 3. Virgil wasn't happy with his 40 time. Caleb Douglas ran a 4.39 at the NFL Combine. Kaylee Joe. Now, even though Virgil wasn't excited about his, he has maybe an inside track. He's been working out with a couple of NFL wide receivers, including Mohamed Sanu, who played for 5 different teams in the NFL. A good guy to have on your side to try to get your foot in the door.
Just the relationship we have, that's like an uncle. He calls me his nephew. He's been watching me since Miami, Ohio days, and just being with him just has expanded my game, and it showed me from a bigger receiver perspective how to get in and out of my breaks, the steps that I need to do, like the explosiveness and the hands and looking at every ball in. And then what's so cool about that, me and Mike Evans are close too, and I'm going up there in a couple of days to get some work in with Mike Evans. So it's just been cool, all the vets and stuff reaching out and liking my game. So Mohamed Sanu, he's my boy, and Mike Evans too. They're real cool.
And we can't forget about quarterback Baron Morton. He told us at Pro Day that he is ready to become the best backup in the league. Now, this past season, over 2,700 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Not really the way that he wanted to end his college career, though. But he did help lead Texas Tech to their first ever Big 12 championship and win, plus the college football playoff.
You get an opportunity, go crush it. And, I've been like that since I was a little kid with a chip on my shoulder. So getting this opportunity, this is, nothing beats it for sure. It's a crazy, crazy process. Met with all 32. I've had about 15 formals. Really teams that just need a backup quarterback. So I've heard from, about 10 teams. Had a great interview session. Had 5 interviews last night with teams. Had dinner with the Cowboys last night. So whoever needs a guy, I'm gonna be ready when the name's called. But looking forward to draft day for sure.
Someone else worth talking about on this offense too, Davion Carter, 509 pass block snaps, only 1 sack allowed, 9 pressures allowed, and an 86.2 pass block grade according to PFF.
Yeah, keep our fingers crossed that they give a chance to maybe a smaller interior offensive lineman in him. And another guy, John Carlos Miller, overshadowed by Terrence Carter, obviously, this past season. Didn't have a lot of catches, but a smart, confident, and a guy that proved the year before he can certainly catch the football. So 2 guys we're hoping hear their names called, maybe not, probably free agent route, but nonetheless getting a chance at the next level. Hey, we're not done here on Draft Day Preview, Texas Tech Edition. We've got a special guest from the NFL Network that will join us and give his thoughts. He's watched all of these guys participate in Senior Day and the NFL Combine. Rhett Lewis from the NFL Network joins us when we continue. And now pleased to be joined by a familiar face to some here in West Texas, Rhett Lewis from the NFL Network. Thanks for spending a couple minutes with us here talking some football, Rhett.
This is great, man. I appreciate you guys having me. Great to always chat, man. The Lubbock always, still holds a special place in my heart. The 06 to 08 glory days of Mike Leach's Red Raiders and Bob Knight's basketball Red Raiders, right?
You're dating yourself.
We are. We had some good times back then, man. But man, we're gonna have some Red Raiders littered throughout this first round and all 7 rounds of this draft.
Yeah, we appreciate you hopping on, and obviously you've been able to watch these guys closely during this whole draft process. You called the Senior Bowl. You were at the Senior Bowl practice. We will say, if you were watching the Senior Bowl, you didn't see any Red Raiders participating there. But I mean, you mentioned it on the broadcast throughout the week there, Red. They really made their damage, or did their damage rather, in those practices.
No question. And, like one of my favorite interactions was actually getting a chance to talk to Joey McGuire before the Senior Bowl, just to hear him kind of light up, talking about the guys that were going to be attending the Senior Bowl. And, man, thinking about some of those guys, Lee Hunter, obviously Mobile, Alabama's own Lee Hunter, who had a great practice week. I think one of the guys who really kind of ended up catching my eye throughout the practices and throughout the entire practice week was Reggie Virgil. Big, lengthy receiver who can absolutely fly down the field. So those two guys were probably the two that really caught my eye the most throughout the week in Mobile.
Now, you mentioned some of the guys throwback-wise that you covered here. We mostly talked offensive guys, right? We'll start with a couple of the guys from the defense. You mentioned Lee Hunter. Just a couple of years ago, Texas Tech got Tyree Wilson 7th overall to the Las Vegas Raiders, right? But he was one of those freak athletes size-wise that maybe everybody was like, man, we think what we could do with this guy. You got to see David Bailey up close and personal. What impresses you about him? I know your colleague there at the NFL Network, Daniel Jeremiah, absolutely loves him. Seems like on a regular basis has him projected going number 2 overall to the Jets.
And you know what? I just think he is a little bit more refined at this point than Arvell Reese, who's kind of the challenger to that 2nd overall pick with the New York Jets. And ultimately, I ended up putting Arvell Reese at number 2 in my mock draft, which is out now on NFL.com. And I ended up having David Bailey going number 3 to the Arizona Cardinals. And I can't get Bailey out of the top 3. Because I know the Cardinals have plenty of other needs. They need a right tackle. They could certainly use a running back like Jeremiah Love. But, man, I just have that Oregon game just emblazoned on my mind, both with Lee Hunter and especially with David Bailey. Just an absolute wrecking ball off the edge. His first step, his quickness, his relentlessness. And then, you just kind of factor in the more you get to know him, the football character, right? The IQ, the fact that he graduated Stanford in 3 years before coming over to Texas Tech and continuing to refine his skill set on the field. I think you're getting a more polished product there. I think the floor is way higher with David Bailey, and I don't think the ceiling is that different. So I think it'd be a home run for a team like the Cardinals in the top 3 or the Jets to write that David Bailey's name down on that draft card and turn it in.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about Lee. Love that personality from him for sure at the Combine and Senior Day. I mean, those faces he was making at the camera, but what about what you've seen from him on the field? What are we thinking?
Oh, well, again, I just come back to the last image I had of him absolutely destroying Oregon center on the first play of the game and just becoming that wrecking ball for Texas Tech in the middle of that defense. He's just an absolute stud. And I think, I kind of come back again to what Joey McGuire had talked to me about. And I know you guys have heard him talk about Lee plenty of times, but the fact that he's got that personality and that voice, and the fact that he would go up to the strength coach, there at Texas, like, what do I need to do, man? How do I make sure, that that we're doing everything we can, that I'm doing everything I can to be the best player I could be for my team. Feel like he kind of stepped up as a leader a little bit in this year, and he's a big time player with a big time personality that the guys in the locker room are going to love. And that, his linebackers behind him, a guy like Jacob Rodriguez probably loved having Lee Hunter in front of him, absolutely destroying, the line of scrimmage there. So I just think there's a lot that he can bring to the table.
Yeah, one other play from the Orange Bowl. I know a lot of Texas Tech fans don't want to think about this, but there was a play where Oregon went for it on 4th down, and I think it was a sweep to a running back, and Lee Hunter made the tackle on the sideline. You're like, that guy shouldn't have that type of speed.
Exactly right. And for a guy that size, I mean, we saw it in the one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl. He was dominant, and he kind of showcased his explosive ability. So like he's not just a guy that's going to plug space up there on the defensive front. I think he can create some havoc too.
One other guy that's certainly known for being explosive, and maybe one knock on him is he's not as refined as David Bailey. What do you think of Romello Height, where his ceiling is, I guess, maybe in the draft coming up? He's a guy that obviously put up numbers, and it's one of those, it just seems like he's a speed guy, and they don't know what else he's going to be able to do. Is that
well?
the case?
He's a one speed guy, that's for sure, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like he's just super twitchy, and like he doesn't change. Like that speed, like the pedal doesn't come off the floor. Now, yeah, you might try to change that up a little bit, and you might try to develop a little bit more nuance with some of the ways in which you get after the passer, but plays with that high level of effort. And I loved. I was looking at one of his mic'd ups from earlier in the year. Like he's talking to everybody, right? He's talking to the student trainer. He's talking to one of the young defensive ends. He's just, again, another guy like Lee, and that they have that big personality, super fun to watch, really explosive. So I think I mean, like, he's one of the reasons why Texas Tech didn't have to blitz a lot because of guys like Romello Height and David Bailey. Like, again, Mello maybe not quite as refined in the way that he rushes, but he is a guy that can win one-on-one, which is a real luxury at the next level for, defensive coordinators that are trying to find the best ways to attack. So I think you could find him probably, on day 2, maybe closer to the back half of day 2, once we get into the 2nd and 3rd rounds, most likely.
Okay, someone else that you mentioned, a fan favorite, Jacob Rodriguez. I mean, I remember before the Heisman, people were walking around Lubbock wearing T-shirts, Jacob for Heisman, expert at punching the ball out. What do you think about him?
Well, learning the story of his passion for the punch outs was really one of the more intriguing things for me. During the week we had him at the Senior Bowl. And, I know Coach McGuire had gone up to watch a Detroit Lions practice, and the Lions had made it like a really big deal about going up and punching the ball out. And so Coach McGuire brings that back, and it was like, it was like the gospel to Jacob Rodriguez, right? Like he had just, like, he became obsessed with it, so much so that, as you guys know, like, he feels like he broke his hand like a bunch of different times trying to continue to punch the ball out. He likes punching with that dominant hand, same foot, same shoulder. That's how you strike it. That's where the power comes from. And that is a skill. It's not just something that happens. It's not just like, oh, hey, right place, right time. It is something he works on constantly. And it's just, it's a game-changing play at the next level. And it's why one of the reasons why I believe he's going to be, again, a day 2 type of player, whether that's, back half of the 2nd round or the early in the 3rd round. I'd feel really confident having a player like that, with that kind of leadership ability and that kind of skill set, bringing him into the fold. And I know he's going to work on special teams, but I think ultimately he'll find a home as a starting linebacker in this league.
Right. How much do you think he helped himself just in Senior Bowl and Combine, as opposed to all of the numbers he put up in actual games?
Obviously the production speaks for itself. So you love that part of it, right? Because that's where, if we're talking about, draft evaluation, 90% of it's going to come from what you did on tape during your collegiate career. And then you look to the other pieces of the process to kind of fill up the other buckets, fill up that last 10%, maybe answer any questions you might have. And I don't honestly, I mean, the fact that he ran a 4.58, kind of tells you a little bit about his speed in today's game. Like those second level linebackers, they have to come with a certain, there is a speed requirement there, right? To get sideline to sideline, to be able to cover the entire width of the field. And I think, some of his combine numbers, really kind of tell the story that the fact that he's out there, jumping 38.5 in the vert and over 10 feet in the broad. And those are explosive numbers. So that tells you a little bit about the athletic profile there and makes you feel pretty comfortable about, where he can line up at the next level. So I think the combine was big. I think the Senior Bowl kind of told us already what we saw on tape was that, like, he finds the football. He's just around the ball all the time. And that's because of his prep. That's because of his mental IQ, the way that he attacks the game and attacks the game plan. So I think he's a coach's dream.
Yeah, something else that I think is so interesting about him started out as quarterback. So let's kind of flip the script, talk about offense now. You mentioned Virgil earlier, Caleb Douglas also there at the combine. What do you think about Texas Tech as far as receivers?
Yeah. By the way, that's an expert segue. Like, my goodness, bringing Jacob Rodriguez's background back to get us to the offensive side of the ball. Yeah. I talked to you a little bit about Reggie Virgil. Like, I think he's kind of a stud player. I really enjoyed what he did at the Senior Bowl, like getting downfield and being a guy who can make like some of those big plays. He had a couple of highlights in the early goings of the practice week. And then, the way that Baron Morton kind of, found a way to accentuate those guys' skill sets and kind of bond with those guys in short order, obviously with Reggie Virgil coming in from Miami of Ohio. And then a guy like Caleb Douglas, I think, he was a guy who I know that the coaching staff was really fond of because of the way that his leadership started to develop, and that he kind of brought an authoritative voice to the wide receiver room. Coach McGuire kind of talked to me about him being like the ultimate pro. It's like they do walkthrough on Thursday mornings. They have breakfast from 6 to 6:45. And Coach McGuire does breakfast check. And as soon as he walked into the building, you had Caleb Douglas in the hyperbaric chamber getting his recovery going. Every Thursday at 5:30, he was doing the red light treatment. He was doing the different rehab modalities they had to take care of his body. He was a guy that was already acting like a professional. So the fact that he led the team in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns and was a big-time player in the Big 12 obviously speaks for itself. But I think the more that teams get to know him, they'll really have an appreciation for who he is as a player, kind of in the 360 view of it.
All right, and the final one on this list for us, Baron Morton. You've had a chance to watch him at the Combine. You had a chance to see him at the Manning Passing Academy last summer. Obviously, the injuries are an issue. This might be a guy that has to go the free agent route. But what are some of the things that you see with him as a potential professional quarterback?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing is obviously comes from a great family. Coach Morton was obviously there at Monterey while I was in Lubbock, and was so gracious to me, especially on a night where I forgot to bring the microphone with me to get a post game interview. He talked really loud into the Nat mic, so I'm very appreciative of that. As I'm sure you were at that point, that we had some sound to get to. But he obviously comes from a great family, a football family, and the greatest thing that I kind of noticed about Barron is, that he fit in and looked the part amongst a group of like total alpha quarterbacks, right? Like these are some of the best in the country, and he certainly held his own in that, in that space. And I loved hearing about him, talk about his, the land that he bought with some of the NIL money, and that how he'd bring the guys out there and they'd all kind of just hang out, and whether it was, riding on four-wheelers or just kind of hanging out, talking about ball, talking about life, like the fact that he was a connector. And I think that was one of the things you could see, his magnetism, right? You could see the way that, his teammates would kind of rally around him, and how he could be that kind of beacon, because that stuff's important in the league. And obviously you have to have, a baseline skill set. And I think he has that. But the other stuff I think will help kind of bring bring him along even further and help him kind of find his way in the league. Look, it's not going to be as a starter right away.
Yeah.
It may take some time, but I think there's going to be a value add to the quarterback room that he's in. He's going to help the starter, and maybe he gets put in a pinch, and I'm sure he's going to find a way to perform. And then ultimately, like, it's about continuing to develop. We've seen it. There are these guys like Sam Darnold and Geno Smith who have had these big lapses, in starting games, and have used that time wisely to develop themselves even further, to give themselves a chance later on in their careers. And I think that could be something that Baron Morton does.
Now, the one saving grace for Baron Morton, not that they're the same exact player. Tyler Shuck was injury prone in the college game and had to bounce around a little bit, and we see what he's doing at the professional level right now.
QB1 for the Saints, no question. And so, yeah, I think that's showing that he can bounce back from that stuff, I think is a big thing. I'm sure he'll get asked about that and all the pre-draft, kind of interviews that he has here, but I imagine he'll ace that stuff.
All right. That's Rhett Lewis from the NFL Network, among many other things. Rhett, we appreciate your time, and have a great draft season.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you guys having me anytime.
And a quick reminder, round 1 of the NFL draft, that's going to be Thursday, April 23rd. It's going to start at 7 p.m., rounds 2 and 3 that Friday at 6, and then 4 through 7, Saturday at 11 a.m.
All right, and don't forget, you got to get on there really quick. David Bailey's not going to last that long. Maybe he'll last to like 9th or whatever, and the Kansas City Chiefs can draft him. All right, for Kaylee Jo Hommel, I'm David Collier. Thanks for joining us on the Draft Day preview of Texas Tech.